Welcome to Click to Learn More, the show that looks like clickbait.
There's actually two dorks.
I'm Liddy.
I'm Dorm.
Hi, Dorm.
Hi, Liddy.
So of all the things that you know about me,
Yes.
what would be the first thing that you would say? And it can't be bourbon or kitties.
Video games.
Okay. And then?
Hair. Murder. The next thing I would say.
The next thing is murder. The next thing is murder. I talk a lot about true crime. I talk a lot about violence.
Yes.
I talk a lot about murder.
Yes.
I'm really bad for that.
These are all things you talk about.
To an uncomfortable, unhealthy extent, I think, sometimes. Like, unnatural. So, to say all of that, I'm really excited to tell you about our newest topic, which is going to be Jack the Ripper.
Hey, like the LL Cool J song. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper.
What?
Jack the Ripper.
That's a thing?
King Hercules.
Oh, you did tell me this.
Yeah.
Because you sent me
That's literally the only thing I know
You sent me a
about Jack the
text
Ripper.
that said in all caps, King Hercules, and I didn't know what that meant.
It's an LL Cool J reference.
Or what the kids are saying.
Ladies love Cool James is what LL Cool J stands for.
Is that what J stands for? And his name is James?
James, yeah. Ladies love Cool James. His name is James Todd, I think.
I think he's wrong and it's ladies love cool jams.
Ladies do love Cool Jams. Smuckers?
I keep my jam in the fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Jack the Ripper.
So, speaking of murdering your own show.
Hey.
We're going to talk about Jack the Ripper today.
Okay.
I have my phone here. And I'm sorry if it's annoying.
Can we preface this?
Yeah.
Before we started recording, you quickly, I didn't parse any information, but you scrolled through the amount of notes you have.
I have a lot of notes.
It's ungodly.
I have a lot of notes.
I had no notes last week. I was freeballing.
You were. So I did research and I wanted to be as factual as I could be while still being, while still having an opinion, like an actual opinion about this.
Yes.
Which is to say, as we start talking about this guy or group of guys or whatever was a monster.
Jax the Ripper?
The Jax the Ripper. The acts that these people went through and all this stuff, they were terrible. This is horrible. I'm in no way glorifying anything that this person did, and I do not condone what this person did. That said, it's an incredibly interesting story, and it's an incredibly interesting moment in history for people of British descent, I think.
So, should we start with what I know?
Yes, so please tell me what you currently know besides the Cool Jams song.
I know that LL Cool J. I know that Jack the Ripper
was LL Cool J solved.
Was LL Cool J. Ladies love Cool Jack. That's what it stands for. No, I know that he was a murderer, and I know that he was a serial killer in England in...
Just guess.
Turn of the century, like late 1800s?
1888.
Hey,
very good.
yay.
Very good.
You know how I know that?
How do you know?
Based around H.H. Holmes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say you looked at my notes.
No.
I thought you cheated.
I just based around that World's Fair.
Yeah,
and that's all about... I mean, I know that he's still an unknown quantity. We don't know who he was.
Right. Which is part of why it's so fascinating to me.
Sure.
All the other serial killers that I read about, and I say that it's such a weird thing to say. All the other serial killers, they either died or they were brought to justice or whatever. Like they have an end to their story. He doesn't, because we don't really know who he was or what happened to him. So he was an unidentified Victorian serial killer that operated in the poor areas of the Whitechapel district in the East End of London in 1888. Okay. So they think that it was from 1888 till around 1891, but they're not positive because there are a lot of deaths that were not attributed to him. So there were a lot of deaths before. It was a terrible time to be a woman in East End London, especially to be a prostitute. It's terrible. Not that it's ever a good time to be a prostitute and be safe, I guess, but it was a terrible time to be a prostitute in London. Women were going missing and getting killed left and right. There was even a part that I read that said at one point in the night, someone yelled murder, but it was such a common thing to be yelled in the East End of London that nobody reacted.
Jesus,
so one of the women could have been saved if people just realized that the cry of murder was legit and not as normal as could be.
Yeah.
Which is a little bothersome.
Yeah, it is.
A little worrisome.
It's kind of scary.
So, to that, the exact number of victims has never really been pinpointed. So
I was gonna ask you, how do they? Okay, if he's unknown, if he's never confessed anything, how do they know? What what identifies someone as a possible Jack the Ripper victim?
Okay, so
what is his MO? His modus operandi?
I actually have that in my notes.
Hey.
So he's got 5 canonical murders attributed to him. And canonical just means that they are of the same type of murder in the same time period.
They're in the same canon.
They're in the same show.
Yeah. they're all in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, the same storyline, yeah. So he's believed to be responsible for those canonical 5 because they have the similar modus operandi or MO. Modus operandi
is Latin.
And it means mode or method of operation. Yes. Which is often used for criminal profiling and most often used by the police force.
I knew that one.
To say, like, what's his MO? Yeah. So normally when they're doing criminal profiling, they have a similar MO, and that's how they can kind of trace their suspects back. So the canonical 5 were Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. So something that I found interesting as I was doing research, and I didn't even realize this before, is all of the women except for Mary Jane Kelly were in their 40s, like mid-40s.
Really?
Yeah, and that surprised me because I didn't expect the middle to kind of like an older age range of women to be in that aspect of life, like in that place of life, in that profession. So a lot of the women had multiple professions. Some of them were listed just as beggar.
Oh.
Yeah. One was a hop picker, which I thought was interesting.
Like hops for beer?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so she picked hops, which was interesting. The majority of them, alcoholics.
Interesting.
Yes. So a lot of the women were alcoholics. Yeah. So these women that were murdered were female prostitutes, mostly located in slums. And they were often too poor to afford rooms at night. So a lot of them were just always out on the street. And many of them were alcoholics, like we said.
Sure.
So they just had rough lives all the way around. They had rough life. They had it bad enough before somebody came through and chopped everybody up. Like they had rough lives. So the scariest thing to me about this is that he's best known for not being known. Like that's the scariest thing to me about Jack the Ripper is that he's known because of how anonymous he was.
Right.
Like there's over 100 possible suspects. Like
Jesus. Okay.
Like theories, suspects, like all kinds. Nobody knows. Nobody has a solid suspect. Or if he was even really a he. Like some people said, well, what if it was a woman who like hated all these other women and they were stealing her spot and she wanted to get rid of them, so she killed them all. Or if it was a group of people because gang violence was really prevalent during that time. Or if it were like an actual demon. From another plane, which was also considered, or if these were demonic rituals, or because of how the brutality and the violence behind these murders.
Right.
So there was a lot of.
I'm gonna go ahead and rule the demon theory out.
Well, I don't know. Well, we're gonna touch briefly on suspects later on.
Okay. In the third act of this,
in the third act of
5-part series on Jack the Ripper,
the play known as Liddy Talks About Jack the Ripper.
Right.
So the public believed that it was one person, just because of how like brutal the murders would be. It was kind of easier to think, okay, one person's doing this, not a group of people, not multiple people. It has to be just one guy, right? So the media treated this case miserably, which they kind of bungled everything.
What did the media consist of in 1888?
Newspapers,
and that's it.
Newspapers and word of mouth.
Okay.
So it was a lot of word of mouth. There was a lot of, I heard that she was over there, and I heard that she was with this guy with a bowler cap on. Well, I heard she was over there on the corner over there with a man with a top hat on. So it was a lot of like, I want to talk to the police and be considered, a star witness, and I saw what happened when you didn't. And then they get a lot of crosstalk, and they get a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about, and then they never find their guy. So his modus operandi, which is in my notes, was, and by the way, I should say this up front, he did really bad things. So if you're squeamish at all, you don't get to leave. But if you're squeamish at all...
I'm stuck here.
I mean, we talk about, like, viscera and blood and slashes and body parts. And if that bothers you, you should...
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bad thing to do.
Yeah,
that's a bad
not the
motion.
Best hand signal to make when talking about a murderer.
When I'm talking about a murderer that slit throats. So his modus operandi was deeply slashed throats, often down to the bone. So often completely down to the vertebrae. I told you.
Wow.
And that was normally the cause of death.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so normally you can't eat. Get your throat slit like that, you can't eat anymore. You starve to death. So it was often so far down that it would like leave cuts along the bone.
My goodness. What kind of tool would someone use in 1888 to do that? So it's an
incredibly sharp knife. We'll talk about this a little later. They believe to be between 6 to 8 inches long. So at the time, it was thought, okay, well, maybe some kind of medical device or maybe some kind of butcher's knife or even somebody that works in the leather trade. So somebody that like reupholstered couches and stuff like that could have access.
Could have been a tanner.
Could have been a tanner. Found him.
Sorry, it was me.
This was a sting this whole time.
Oh no.
We've got you, Jack.
No.
SWAT team comes busting in. Done. So, I'm also going to say mutilation a lot. Okay. Like a lot. So if that's the kind of thing that bothers you, you should
How much are you going to say mutilation?
Okay, so his modus operandi was deeply slashed throats.
Yes.
And mutilation, which included mutilation of the body, most notably the chest and abdominal area.
Okay. Sorry to stop you.
No, go ahead.
When you say mutilate, so I pictured like cutting things off.
Cutting things off, cutting the skin, like ripping the skin, Jack the Ripper.
So like cutting off breasts? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep, that had happened. Yep. Terrible. Shouldn't laugh. Nervous laughter. Mutilation of the body is most notably chest, abdominal, and genital area mutilation.
Right.
Mutilation and removal of internal organs. And also facial mutilation. So a little bit of everything. A little bit of fun for the whole family.
Anything he could cut, he did cut.
Yeah, if he could cut it, he did. Essentially. Jesus. Except the bottom of their feet. I think the bottoms of their feet were usually safe. Maybe not for...
Well, thank God.
Maybe not for the last one.
I'm glad they saved the feet.
Yeah.
That's where everyone lives from.
That's where everyone gets their power from. Yeah. So the name Jack the Ripper actually originated...
Yes, I'm interested in this.
So it originated in a letter that was sent to a newspaper that was believed to be written by someone claiming to be the murderer.
Okay.
Okay, so the newspaper receives this letter... And it's saying, like, I did all these murders, and they signed their name as Jack the Ripper. So this was the Dear Boss letter. So there's 3 different letters or kind of items that were sent to newspapers or sent to people within the media that are widely considered to be the most likely to actually be from Jack the Ripper.
Okay.
Even though they don't even know if those really are. Because
sure.
the police had received like over thousands of letters that said, I'm Jack the Ripper, I'm Jack the Ripper, and they weren't. So it was a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon of the sensationalized media. So he had the Dear Boss letter, one called From Hell, which is where the movie with Johnny Depp comes from. It's also a graphic novel.
Written by Alan Moore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I've never read it.
There's this. It's one of the best ones.
I love Alan Moore.
And a Saucy Jackie postcard.
Wow.
So he got a little saucy towards the end there.
Can we talk about that one?
It's the Saucy Jackie. We're going to talk about all of them.
Okay.
So he had signed at the end, and I'll read the letter to you later.
Oh, all right.
He had signed at the end and said Jack the Ripper, and then even kind of made this little joke like, "Don't worry, I'll brand myself. Like, don't worry, I'll take care of the branding. Like, I'll call myself this. This is what I want to be called." So another serial killer that did something similar was the Zodiac.
Oh.
He branded himself, which was...
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Right, Jake Gyllenhaal did it. He's a murderer. Can't say that.
But he was the detective,
That's libel. I don't know.
I haven't watched Zodiac.
I never saw that movie because I thought it was going to be terrible.
I saw part of it. It was okay.
I thought it was going to be terrible, so I never watched it. I did watch From Hell, and it was all right.
I need to read the novel.
Graphic novel was better.
Alan Moore's great.
Yeah.
Is it about Jack the Ripper?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about the Jack the Ripper From Hell letter.
Okay, cool.
It's like based around that. It's got a twist ending to it that's kind of strange. Anyway, so because of the method that he murdered people, he would remove organs from them. I say people, it was women. He killed women. He would remove organs from them, and it was believed at one point that he may have some kind of surgical knowledge because of how he would go in and he would like take part of the uterus, and he at one point took a kidney, and so people believed like, well, maybe he knows something about anatomy, like maybe he knows something about how to remove parts of a body.
He's doing this too precisely.
Right. And then other people were saying, no, he could be a butcher, like he could be somebody that just knows what different organs look like and is just taking them apart, like willy-nilly. I also have the feeling that like I don't know what it looks like to open a body, but I imagine that it's not all like one big glob. Like it's like sectioned and there's parts.
Yeah.
I feel like you would look at something, you may not know that's the uterus, but you look at something and you go, oh, that's a thing. I'm going to take that. Like,
so is he taking them purely for trophies or do we know?
We don't know. Okay. So he did take a kidney and brought half of it back, which we'll find out about later.
What? Mm-hmm. Sort of a loaning system with half a kidney?
Yeah, it wasn't good. What? It wasn't good. And then at one point he takes a heart. But for the most part, he kind of leaves he leaves them on the body as art. So he'll like take the organs out and lay them on one of your shoulders.
Oh, like, it's like when Gordon Ramsay takes apart a lobster and then puts the lobster shell underneath it.
It's exactly like that.
Okay, I understand this.
It's exactly like that. So, of the 5 murders, the first one that happened was to Marianne Polly Nichols. She was 43, and all of these women were really small. She was 5'2".
Oh.
She was a very small woman. This is just me editorializing, but it could have very well been because they didn't have proper nutrition.
I was going to say, wasn't height
yeah,
across the board shorter?
Yeah, so they probably didn't have proper nutrition. They probably weren't taking very good care of themselves, and because of that, they ended up shorter in stature than we would consider to be average or tall today.
Right.
She was killed on August 31st, so she did not have 4 pence required to rent a bed at an inn. So she decided she was going to go out on the street and make that money. And there was a little tidbit about her that I actually really liked, which was she said she was super confident about it because she just got this new bonnet. She had like acquired a new bonnet. It said acquired as if I feel like she probably stole it. Yeah. But she had a new bonnet, so she was gonna work that bonnet. And she's like, I'm gonna definitely make enough money to stay in a bed tonight. Don't worry about it. I got this.
I got this new suite.
I got this. Yeah. So she was last seen alive by her roommate. And she had told her roommate that she had made enough money to get a bed 4 times over, but had spent it on alcohol.
Oh.
So she had the money multiple times, but just didn't. She's like, nah, I'm going to get more alcohol. I'm doing great. I'm going to get more beer. Yeah. So, so that was how she died. I mean, not of alcohol, but she could have stayed in a bed that night. And she probably would have lived for longer, but she didn't, and she didn't. So
that was well done.
Her body was discovered at about 3:40 a.m. She had bruises on her face, and her throat was severed by 2 cuts going left to right. So a lot of people believed that Jack the Ripper was left-handed. This, to me, says he was right-handed. Because if you pull from left to right, you're automatically going right to left because you're left-handed.
Oh, yeah, I am.
So you're going right to left because you're left-handed. Right. Me, if I'm going to stab something and pull, I'm going to use that strength.
Yeah, no, I would totally use... it would be so weird to go forward.
Right, exactly. So I'm going from left to right, which shows that he was probably most likely right-handed. So he used 2 giant slashes.
Quick question.
Yes.
How do you tell that?
So it's where the puncture wound is and where the ripping of the flesh ends.
So is it generally wider at the puncture wound?
So it depends on the weapon used. Okay. So if it's a like what we would consider like a steak knife, they've got a point and serration, so where it ends is going to be ripped at the end a little bit. Whereas
it's going to be clean on the puncture side.
Whereas like a dagger, which is going to have like a wider top and a skinnier blade, is going to be wider at the section where it goes in. And then it's going to drag across and it's going to be skinnier at the time where you pull it out. Because the puncture was heavier there. So.
Okay, that's fascinating. I didn't know you could tell.
Yeah, see, so a lot of
so even then they could tell that.
Normally it was sometimes it was guesswork. And they had a lot of different people who were like crawling all over themselves to try to solve these murders when it got to a certain point. That everybody just wanted to argue and believe that they knew what was going on. Sure. But they believe that it was a 6 to 8 inch blade and it was incredibly sharp. And it had to have been. These women almost instantly died.
Hey, that's
due
good.
to this. I mean, silver linings, right? Almost instantly died due to the slash marks across their throat, but he did it twice, which makes me wonder, like, was the second time just for funsies, or, like, maybe the first time didn't always work?
I was going to say, did he always do it twice?
So, the first and second one were twice, for sure.
So was he learning on the job?
Don't know.
Okay.
Like, was this his first murder? Like, did he not really know how it's going to go? Because it's really hard to die from a stab wound. From a slashing throat wound, you're going to die pretty quick. But
blood loss.
But like, normally a stab wound won't kill you. Like, you can survive unless you hit, one of your main arteries right away. Yeah. But I mean, like, people live through 30, 40 stab wounds before eventually they bleed out. And that's normally what kills them.
Right.
So, which, I mean, you can also puncture an organ like we were talking about. But for the most part, like, he knew something about killing. He knew something about it because he didn't just run up and stab and steal things. He had ulterior motives. He would run up and slash their throats and then get to work, essentially.
So is this like an ambush thing? It wasn't like a lure them in and then...
So it's believed that he may have posed as a person who wanted to spend the night with them, like as a client, maybe. Like he would come up and say, like, and that's why a lot of people think he might have been a well-to-do man, because he could walk up in a suit and say, like, spend the night with me, and these women are going to go, heck yeah, look at you. You got a huge suit on. You look
American
great.
Psycho.
You look great. Yeah, you look great. Of course I'm going to spend the night with you. And then he leads them off to a quiet corner in the courtyard, and he slashes their throats. Okay. So, which is pretty terrible. So... the incision completely severed all the tissues in her throat down to the vertebrae. So the first kill he did, or the first kill that was found that was attributed to him, was very brutal. Like, that's an incredibly brutal thing. Normally, when killers first start out, they're not so sure of themselves.
Sorry. I've noticed myself this entire time, like, doing this and, like protecting my neck in a way, which is really interesting. Just talking about, like, I feel the side of my neck, like... very prevalently.
Does it help to know that the large vessels of the neck were completely severed?
No.
Does that help?
Doesn't.
No. They were on both sides. They were completely severed.
Sure doesn't.
That doesn't help. No. Because of this, it's believed her death would have been quick, if not instantaneous. So she either died very quickly or instantly, depending on... They didn't know for sure. They weren't aware. So this is where it gets a little...
Oh, this is it.
This is the part that gets a little squeamy. The lower part of the abdomen was ripped open with a deep, jagged wound, which means he probably started a slash and then ripped the rest of it. He was very brutal for no reason. Several other incisions on the abdomen were caused by the same knife, so he might have like stabbed a little bit, like messed around a little bit. He wasn't entirely sure what he wanted to do the first time, I think.
It sounds like almost experimental.
Yeah, like he's kind of playing a little bit. Like he's not really sure what he wants to... He's killed, and that's good. He's done his thing. Like that's what he set out to do, but now he's going to kind of mess around a little bit. So they think that the injuries would have taken less than 5 minutes to have been performed on her, and they were made after she was dead. So she wasn't stabbed or slashed or anything before she died. It was completely after. Post-mortem, absolutely, yeah. So that was the first murder.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Was it sort of an eye cut? Is that how he would have gotten in?
Oh, like
top, bottom, middle, and then like a gate?
No.
You said ripped open.
He would have probably... because it was her full abdomen, he probably would have just started below her ribcage and just, like, went down and just, like, pulled open the sides.
Oh, so it was not as clean as I'm picturing.
No.
Okay.
No. He probably went in and just... I don't think his first one was very clean.
Okay.
There was no notes that I came across to back that, to corroborate that.
Sure.
It very well could have been. It could have been, but...
Right.
They said that was a very sharp knife. I imagine that he did some ripping, therefore Jack the Ripper came into play at some point. But a ripper could also be like somebody who's just like...
ripping people to shreds.
Yeah. Killing people, ripping their lives apart, essentially. Right. Yeah. So the second person that died was Annie Chapman. She was 47 and only 5 feet tall. She was pretty small. So the first one was August 31st. The second was September 8th.
Oh, wow.
So he gave
a week later.
Yeah, so he gave a little bit of space in there. Her friends called
her...
Oh,
that's a little bit of space. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
That sounds instant.
A little bit of space. So basically, when they're starting out in serial killers, they get that first taste, and then they got to do it again.
It's a bloodlust.
They didn't get caught. Yeah, they didn't get caught. They did this thing they've always wanted to do. They've always thought about it. Nobody's going to miss her. She's a prostitute. What's it matter? I might be doing a good thing for the world. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out and get another one. So he went out basically a week later, and she was called Dark Annie because she had dark hair. So her friends called her Dark Annie, which I thought was interesting.
Sounds like a villain.
I know. So she was discovered 6 a.m. on September 8th near a doorway in a backyard. So she was just kind of like left in a backyard on the grass, just like bleeding out. Sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Was it her backyard?
No.
Or just
she didn't have a backyard.
Right, because she was...
Yeah.
No.
So as in the case with Marianne Nichols, her throat was slit twice in the same method, the left to right, which leads me to believe, a lot of people think he's left-handed or thought he was left-handed. I think he was right-handed.
Detective Liddy says.
I think he was right-handed.
No, that makes good sense to me.
You wouldn't go out of your way to switch to throw off your scent. It's 1888. They have if you didn't get caught like red-handed, there's no way they could prove it was you. Like he could have been standing in the crowd going, "Oh yeah, I totally saw it. It was a dude down the street. I watched him run that way with a big giant hat on. Like it's definitely that guy."
Yeah.
He could have been there. Like there's nothing to say he wasn't. Like there's no evidence to back up anything at all because it was 1888. Police work was non-existent. So, her throat was severed, and I put in my notes right-handed as opposed to left-handed, as people believe. Her abdomen was slashed entirely open, with her intestines strewn about.
Okay.
They were thrown out of her abdomen over each of her shoulders, respectively. So she had
some sort of weird overalls.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So she was wearing her internal organs. Her she was wearing she was wearing her intestines over each of her shoulders. It was later discovered part of her uterus had been removed. So different places that I found said her entire uterus was removed, and then somewhere else I saw just part of it was removed. And I saw people saying more often that part of it was removed, so I went with part of it. So I think that a chunk of it was taken, not the entire
Some
uterus.
people might just say her uterus was removed because...
Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it, if not all of it, was taken, but...
Can't imagine this sort of human bandolier that he's made.
Yeah, he had to get them out of the way to get to the uterus, is the understanding.
Oh, so he just kind of...
He was throwing... Well, I think that he planned where they went, but he was getting them out of the way to get to what he wanted. So he wanted the uterus.
Sort of like a treasure chest sort of grab and pull situation.
Ooh, like a chest of scarves, and you're just throwing them willy-nilly.
Scarves is so gross. Okay.
Just a bunch of
Hey,
pearl
we might
necklaces.
have to put like a parental advisory on this vid.
I know, it's got a lot of stuff in it. So the interesting thing about him taking the uterus is that they weren't actually sure he took it. They weren't actually sure that he took it. Because during that time, it was really common for people to steal organs from bodies. Because the only way to get organs from bodies and to do, I don't want to say experiments, but to like open them up and see how they worked and stuff like that was to take them from a corpse.
Right.
And what better corpse to take them from than one that's already pre-opened? So you got a
somebody
corpse.
Could have run by and just...
Well, so it could have been somebody in... Just call it a ute.
Yeah.
It could have been somebody within the medical profession who had either been paid to bring someone else a uterus, or could have just thought, I want to learn how a uterus works. And so took part of it out, not realizing it wasn't all of it. Or took all of it. We don't know what actually got taken out at this point. So surgical specimens were really common to be stolen from dead bodies. Body snatchers were really big during this time because they would... And some people would kill other people just to sell them to the local medical school so that they could do tests on them. It was a really dark time.
Yeah.
In England's history, in London's history.
I know a little bit about this because, again, my one point of reference for murder at this time is Devil in the White City. Mm-hmm. Similar sort of thing.
Right.
Like the sort of organ black market that was going on. That because he was selling bodies to... H.H. Holmes was selling bodies to a medical school in Illinois, I think?
So, yeah. So he was killing people and just... But that'll have to be another one. We'll have to talk about that.
But I'm just providing my one point of reference for the time period.
For sure. But we'll have to talk about that because that's an interesting story.
It is.
He was an interesting dude. A terrifying dude, but an interesting dude. So the first sighting of the possible killer was during this murder. Because one witness described seeing Chapman at about 5:30 a.m. With a dark-haired man of a shabby genteel appearance.
What
so he was
does
a
that
shabby genteel gentleman. So he was a little shabby, but he still looked like he might have been a well-to-do fellow.
With a 5 o'clock shadow or something.
A little shabby, like shabbily dressed, perhaps, like a little wrinkled, a little, like, not quite pressed, not quite professionally dressed.
Right.
So the police doctor described the murder weapon as such, and I will just read it as he has... how he has described it. The instrument was used at the throat and abdomen. The instrument used at the throat and abdomen was the same. It must have been a very sharp knife with a thin, narrow blade and must have been at least 6 to 8 inches in length, probably longer. But they ruled out the fact that it could have been a sword or, what's the one with the... En garde. Ding, ding,
a rapier?
Ding, ding. Yeah, it wasn't those. So they decided it wasn't a sword and it wasn't a rapier. So they said it wasn't a soldier. So they were like, it couldn't be, or if it was a soldier, he wasn't using this kind of weapon. He wasn't using his...
It's weird that they thought it could have been a sword.
Yeah, so I don't know what brought that on. The super sharp.
That's a very... common sense here. That's a very precise cut to make with a sword.
It is indeed.
Just like a one of these motions.
Like woo! Because that's kind of not a lot of like leverage to have. But 6 to 8 inches on a blade is a pretty long blade. Yeah. Like that's not that big. This is like 2 feet.
Yeah, this is a little bit longer than 6 to 8
that's like
inches.
A butcher's knife, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, so.
A cleaver.
A cleaver. Could you imagine your uterus chopped out? You couldn't.
I can't literally.
But. So anyway, the Dear Boss letter that was sent,
right.
It was received by the Central News Agency of London on September 27th. It was passed to Scotland Yard about 3 days later-ish, so the reports on this vary. So some people say that Scotland Yard and the police got it on the 28th, and some say the 29th, and some say the 30th. So it depends. Regardless, yeah. So regardless, the newspaper had it first, and they published it first. And people read it and passed it around and saw it first. So the message was written in red ink, which was very edgy. It was written in red ink.
I'm going to kill people in red.
And had a ton of spelling and punctuation errors. Now, this is not uncommon for serial killers, especially if you're trying to make it look like you're less intelligent than you are.
Oh.
So a lot of serial killers who have written notes or have written letters in some form will absolutely misspell things or put bad punctuation, bad grammar to throw you off that they're actually well educated.
My question was going to be this.
Yes.
Is that not indicative of the time?
That's also fair.
Okay. So, I was wondering what the literacy rate of 1880s England was.
Not a lot of people were literate during that time. That's a good point. You would think if this had been a doctor, which was one of the theories, he would be able to spell his words and use his grammar properly, but you never really know. He might not have been an English major. So, so the letter goes justly.
Oh.
And I will read it for you.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to do a dramatic reading. Let me get into my character.
No.
Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I've laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I'm down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You'll soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers just for jolly. Wouldn't you keep this letter back until I do a bit more work, then give it out straight? My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Now, this is where he comes in and starts saying this stuff about branding himself. He says, don't mind me giving the trade name. So he gives himself the trade name, and then says, P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. End of letter. So, he's playing on two different parts here. He's playing on the fact that he knows they're onto him. He knows this is a sensationalized thing. He knows this is something. And he says the joke about Leather Apron. So there was a rumor going around that there was a man in the area called Leather Apron. No. And they brought him in and like had him checked out and all this stuff, and he had an alibi and he was fine. And then they started saying, well, maybe he's a doctor because these cuts were so precise, and he jokes at that too, like laughs at that too. So nowadays, while many believe the validity of the letter, a lot of people don't. Like a lot of people are like, that doesn't seem like it's legit, which is fair because the majority of serial killers don't name themselves. They just don't. They have huge egos, but they normally don't name themselves. It's often believed now that it was a hoax that was written by journalists to try to encourage more circulation in their newspapers.
Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. So they wanted they wanted to get a little more money from it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one journalist is reported to have confessed that he had written it and other letters signed by Jack the Ripper under the guise of keeping the business alive. So he was trying to keep the newspaper business alive, and in doing so,
it was a mess.
wrote letters admitting to being a murderer. But this was never definitively proven either way. So he never had any evidence that he really did write it. He never had any evidence he didn't write it. It was kind of, this whole thing was a media mess. It was an absolute mess.
Yeah.
So sensationalized content for more widespread interest is basically what was happening, which that doesn't happen these days.
No.
Right?
Please?
Yeah. And really, the idea that a killer is taunting the police by writing the letters is part of what makes the story so interesting, is because it's so ballsy.
Yeah.
Like, to go out and actually murder someone and then write a letter saying, hey, guess what? I just murdered someone.
Yeah, I got away with it.
And got away with
Suck
it.
it.
Haha.
That's,
You're not going to catch me. Good luck. Like,
JTR.
that's so... that's JTR.
Yeah.
Signed with a heart and a kiss. Like, that's so ballsy to do. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's wild to me. So, like many items related to the Jack the Ripper case, after everything was said and done, the Dear Boss letter went missing. It was just, like, gone.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just, like, gone. So it's believed that probably somebody from the police force took it as a memento, like, as a souvenir for the case.
Or to sell it to some museum or something.
Right. So in 1987, it was returned anonymously.
100 years later.
Yeah. Anonymously to the Metropolitan Police.
By a 140-year-old man.
He turned to dust instantly as soon as he walked in.
It was me.
So they had it for a year before they announced that it was back, because I guess they wanted to test it and make sure that it was legit. It was a real thing. So 100 years later, in 1988, it was announced that it was back, that they had it.
Some sort of weird rerun scenario.
So strange that
It's really bizarre.
100 years later, the letter comes back. The one of three of the most popular aspects of this entire case was brought back.
I know you probably don't know this, but how does that happen? How does
it gets passed down in families?
Sure.
Like, if a police officer took it from the case, like, he took it home to his family, they passed it down to their family.
I'll pose something to you, though.
Yeah.
Say you are the daughter of this policeman or whatever. You get this letter.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I stole this. What's up? Like, do you not just go, what the hell?
Why do you have this?
Can we take it to the authorities, please?
Why do we have the letter from a murderer?
Cool.
Right, like, not like, sweet, Dad, let's hang on to it. I assume maybe they thought it would be worth something.
Sure.
So they were like, let's hang on to this. We'll pass it down
assumption.
To our family members through the years. And then it got anonymously donated, which is, so somebody had a conscience. 100 years later, somebody had a conscience.
Right.
So because of the disconnect between whether or not he actually wrote the letter, a lot of people don't call him Jack the Ripper because they don't believe that...
So what do they call him?
So they call him the Whitechapel Killer, or they call him Leather Apron because it was believed that he wore a leather apron when he did his murders. So a lot of the times...
Jack the Ripper stuck more than the other two.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so much more.
And even... Okay, so I know that letter might be falsified. But is there really a point behind naming serial killers other than having a common vernacular for them?
No.
So why would people deny that?
The police will tell you a name, like, we're calling him the Night Prowler, or we're calling him the...
Cool comic book character.
Well, the Night Prowler, or who was it? It might have been Night Prowler, was actually a serial killer.
Oh.
Yeah, who snuck in at night through screen doors and killed people in the beds.
Through screen doors?
Richard Ramirez was the Night Stalker. He was the Night Stalker. That's what he was. Yeah, he was a Night Stalker. He wanted to be called something else. He loved AC/DC or something like that. He wanted to be called...
Hell's Bells.
Yeah, he wanted to be called Thunderstruck. He wanted to be called something else.
Call me the Highway to Hell.
But normally serial killers gain a name or some kind of notoriety in the media so that they can continue telling stories about them. So
right.
It
doesn't matter if it's fake.
Yeah, it didn't matter that it was fake. It's still a name that we refer to him as.
Yeah, so, and I think the widespread public knows that Jack the Ripper's a thing, at least.
Right.
I know nothing about it, but I know a little bit.
Yeah, it wouldn't have changed anything if they called him the Whitechapel Murderer or if they called him Jack the Ripper. It's still whatever.
Plus, let's be honest, Jack the Ripper sounds way better.
It's a really cool name.
It's
a much better name than the Whitechapel Killer. It's a much...
Or Leather Apron, which sounds like some weird, like...
Leatherface twin.
Play from the turn of the century. Is like, oh no, here comes Leather Apron.
Leather Apron's on his way. Oh, we're gonna get so much flack for doing really bad English accents.
Someone need leather.
Oh my god.
It's just Oliver Twist, but with leather.
It's like a grown-up Oliver Twist. Please, sir, may I have some more?
May I have some leather?
Anyway, back to murder. Next on the list.
I'm sorry to derail us from such a happy, positive topic.
I know, right? Next on the list is Elizabeth Stride, also called
That's a great name.
Long Liz.
Whoa.
Was her nickname. Long Liz.
Here's Long Liz.
Long Liz. She was 44.
It's a Forrest Gump quote.
She was 5'2".
And she was long?
So that's the thing. They don't know if they called her Long Liz because of the shape of her face, which is possible. She had a longer face. Or if her last name being Stride is a long step.
Oh, that's cool.
Or if it was a joke on how small she was.
Liz Stride is a baller-ass name, though, right?
Elizabeth Stride. It's a very cool name. It's a very cool name. So she was 44 and she died on September 30th. So this one is where...
So either right at or right after the letter was publicized.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the thing. Dear Boss letter was sent and then this next murder happens.
Did he send ears in?
This murder was an incredibly rushed murder. So this is one of the...
As opposed to his other... much more...
So others, he had time to disembowel them.
Right, okay.
So with this one, he didn't. So what happened with this one was... there was an absence of mutilations.
So you could say the murder happened in Stride.
Sorry. You could say that. Poor Elizabeth. So there was a lack of mutilations on the body.
Right.
But she was slit across the throat from left to right, as was his MO. And she was just left on the ground. When they found her, there was a man who came back from a run. He had a piece of leather on his shoe, a long piece of leather, and he was coming back home to clip it off because it was like bothering him or something. And when he got back home, he heard a little bit of a fight going on, tried to figure out what it was, came around, and there was a woman laying on the ground, bleeding out, still warm. So she had just died, like seconds before. He was later interviewed and said he believes that the killer was probably still around at that time. Like was probably hiding somewhere nearby him at the time. So he called for help. Somebody came and ran over and tried to help.
Right.
A couple policemen came by and tried to help as well. And there were a couple horse slaughterers, which was an actual title during this time, a horse slaughterer.
Which does killing of horses?
Slaughtered horses, I guess. Just a horse slaughterer. And they had not heard anything out of the ordinary. So they
well, I mean, their ordinary is killing horses.
Their normal sound is screaming horses. So when you hear that, you don't have a normal. There's not a normal anymore. So anyway.
Okay.
Her throat was severely gashed. And there was an abrasion on the skin above about 1¼ inches in diameter, apparently stained with blood under her right brow. So he had slashed her and she had blood on her face from the arterial spray, probably. But
which is, I'm taking a guess here. Spray from the artery.
Yes, spray from the artery goes farther and faster than spray from the rest of your veins because it's directly connected to your blood.
It's higher pressure.
It's directly connected to your blood, to your heart. It's directly connected to your heart. So every time your heart beats, it will squirt out.
Right. And it's like when in really bad sci-fi movies, somebody gets cut in the neck and it's just like, that's their artery.
Yeah, that's their arterial spray. You can normally tell it at a crime scene. It looks a lot different from just a normal amount of blood. These are things I know.
This is going to be a later episode.
These are things I know. So there was bruising on her chest, which suggested she might have been pinned down by her attacker. Okay. So he probably kneeled on her to hold her down while he sliced her throat. So she was warm still, which is the thing that gets me, because she wasn't mutilated. So everybody was like, well, it might not have been Jack the Ripper. It might have been somebody just slashing her throat. But less than an hour later, another murder happens. And this woman was slashed in the throat and had her organs removed and had facial mutilation. So not only had he failed to do the last murder he wanted to do, he was angry that he didn't get a chance to finish the murder and took it out. Took it out on this woman, who was Catherine Kate Eddowes. She was 46 years old and she was 5 feet tall. Small women.
Yeah, these are all
very small. Also on September 30th. So she was the second person killed within an hour of each other. And her intestines were drawn out to a large extent and placed on her right shoulder. A piece of about 2 feet was detached from her body and was placed between her body and her left arm, apparently by design. So he just took a chunk of it and like left it next to her body on her left side. I imagined it when I read it as if she were holding a baby in that left side, like as if she was on, but I don't know. I don't know how that looked, but I imagine he just detached a part of her intestines and left it to left. It also said that she was covered in fecal matter, but I wasn't going to include that, but then I did, because of her intestines and that stuff gets pulled out. There's a lot of stuff. Okay. There's a lot of stuff connected in there that can go wrong. But the lobe of her right ear was cut completely through. So part of her right ear was completely gone, according to reports.
Sort of a Mick Foley situation.
So it had been completely cut through. Which in his letter, Dear Boss letter, he said, I will take part of an ear.
That's why I asked earlier.
I will take part of an ear and send it to the police. That's what he told them. However, he didn't take it with him. It was believed that some people say that part of the ear came off during the frenzy of the attack. Like he had just happened to slash at her earlobe and it came off.
Oddly happenstance.
Because he also slashed up her face. So she had some pretty bad facial mutilation going on across the bridge of her nose, on her cheeks, on her eyelids. She had some...
Lady?
She had some cuts.
I'm going to ask you to redact anything about eyes moving forward.
Can't do that, because guess what? There's more.
Oh, God.
Her left kidney was carefully taken out and removed, with a large part of her uterus as well. So we got another instance of part of a uterus being gone. Again, not sure if that was him, not sure if that was somebody else.
Cleaning up.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The police surgeon believed the perpetrator of the act must have had considerable knowledge of the position of the organs in the abdominal cavity and the ability to remove them. So, like, he knew how to get in and take the kidney out. Okay. Because the kidney's in a pretty good place.
He played Surgeon Simulator.
Yeah, he did. He played Surgeon Simulator on easy, probably, because he just, like, got in there and got it out, no problem. Yeah. Just grabbed it with your fingers and lost it.
He lost his watch, though. Popped off.
He did pop off his watch. Time. And stabbed it with the... What is that syringe that's got all the psychedelic drugs in it that, like, makes your vision go all weird? That's what he accidentally did that.
Yeah.
So, in addition to the abdominal wounds, she also had her face mutilated, which I said. Across the bridge of her nose. You still with me?
Uh-huh.
Still good?
Not liking that I'm still with you.
On both of her cheeks.
That's fine. I mean, it sucks for her, but she's dead.
And through the eyelids of both eyes.
Through! No, you didn't say through up there.
Through the eyelids of both eyes. The tip of her nose and part of her ear were also cut off.
Whatever.
Whatever, let's talk about the eyes.
No, it's not. Ever again.
Yeah, so all it says is through the eyes.
Okay, that's all I need.
Now remember, the Dear Boss letter was received before these two murders were committed.
Right.
However, it's believed that since the letter was put out like 24 hours before these murders, that was plenty of time for a copycat killer or for someone else to come through and do it and take up this. So if the letters had indeed been faked, there was the chance someone
confirming them by being a copycat.
Someone could go out and copycat it and say, well, I just became Jack the Ripper by doing this thing before he could do it. So It me. So the murders are commonly referred to as the double event, which came from the Saucy Jackie postcards. We're going to talk about that now.
Yes. Thank God.
So it was received by the police the day after those two murders, which means...
Okay.
It's weird, right? Because it was received by the police the day after.
Which means you would have to mail it...
Before?
Yeah.
Well, so that doesn't make sense to me.
Dropped it off at the post office that morning.
Yeah.
The murders.
Right, unless he dropped it off at the police department.
The station, right.
Or... I don't know. I don't know how that would have happened. But... It was postmarked and received on October 1st, which is the day after the murders. So
okay, that's weird. It was postmarked on the same day?
Mm-hmm. Postmarked and received on the same day.
It's quick mail.
Yeah, very quick mail. You wouldn't think of it in the 1880s.
He Amazon primed that letter.
He primed it for sure. But the postcard mentions that the two victims were killed very close to one another. So he calls out the fact that these two people had died. So it almost makes it sound as if he killed them, went immediately back home, wrote his postcard, put it in the mail. Like,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know sort of the media landscape of 1888.
Okay.
Would they have reported that the double murders would have happened, or is this sort of a confirmation that whoever wrote the letter committed the murders because they weren't publicized yet?
So... This is rough because they didn't really, they thought it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, this whole thing, because by the time that the police started talking about it, like after it happened, it was in the newspaper.
Immediately.
Like it was in the newspaper, like it was.
But it would have been that morning,
word of mouth. Yeah. It was early morning. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning.
The day of October 1st.
Yeah, so it would have been,
was it September 31st or 30th? I don't know how many days.
September 30th.
I don't know.
So they were found in the early hours. They were found in the early hours of the 30th. So the early hours is in like 5 a.m. on the 30th.
The press could have gotten it quickly enough out
yes.
that it was in the copy that day.
Yes. So there was yeah. So it could have been out in time for people to have known about it, have heard stuff from their neighborhood or whatever, sure. and written this postcard. It could have happened. This could have been a thing.
Okay, sorry I derailed you. Why is it called Saucy Jackie?
So he refers to himself as Saucy Jackie.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to read that for you. So he says, I was not coddling dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number 1 squealed a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Had not time to get years off for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back until I got to work again. Jack the Ripper. So he's getting a little more... like, all of his words are running together.
Yeah.
There's not any, like...
far less coherent.
Yeah, he's far less coherent. He's slowly going down this rabbit hole of... he's not making much sense anymore. Right. He's deteriorating. Like, it's bad. So some authors have argued that the letter was sent before the murders were publicized. Or I guess it's a postcard, but... making it unlikely a hoaxer could have knowledge of the crime. But the letter was postmarked more than 24 hours after the killings took place. Long after many details were known by journalists and residents in the area. So, it could have been... right. Nobody knows. That's the infuriating part, is like, when I first started like reading this and researching this forever ago, I was like, oh my gosh, he wrote all these letters and he was so cocky and no. And then I started reading, I was like, oh, well, that could have been a hoax. Like, that could have been, right. Like that could have been something else. Yeah, for sure. So copies of both messages were posted to the public in hopes that the writing style would be recognized, but it never was. Nobody ever came forward. Nobody ever stepped up and said, oh yeah, that's my uncle's cousin's handwriting or anything.
I had this kid in class and this is what...
Never came up. Never came up. So the media circus surrounding the Ripper killings was so intense that, like, no matter what happened, the police were just at odds. Like, they were receiving hundreds of letters a day of people, like, admitting to be Jack the Ripper in all different types of handwriting and all different types of punctuation and whatever. And not a lot of people were literate during that time. So these were people that were writing these full letters using their time and effort and their education to write full letters admitting to a crime they didn't commit.
Just a Josh.
Just for attention, maybe? Like, just, I don't know. But
it's the earliest form of trolling.
Yeah, they for real. They trolled them. So the majority of the information that the police received was deemed useless.
Right.
Like, it was...
yeah, that makes sense.
They couldn't use it. It was bad. So in the years after the Ripper murders, the Saucy Jackie postcard disappeared in the same way that the Dear Boss one did. It was never discovered again. Oh. It was never brought up again. So there's photographic evidence that it existed at some point, but we don't know for sure because we've never actually seen it. So at this point, they were no closer to finding him, and he was about to do his worst work yet.
No.
We've not even gotten to his worst work.
No.
Yeah. So, a quick note before we begin on this next part. Serial killers tend to do this thing called escalating.
Sure.
Where they reach a certain point where it's just not enough. Right. So what they've been doing is not enough. They're not receiving enough fame. They're not receiving enough they're not getting enough airtime. They're not getting enough attention. Like, they want to do more. Some serial killers start to feel like they'll never get caught. Like, I'm going to do whatever I want because I'm invincible. Other ones want to get caught subconsciously.
Right.
They get to a point where they're so tired of it. They're bored of it because it's so easy now. They want to be caught. They want to get it over with. So they start doing worse things with less concern about getting caught. And this is called escalation normally in a serial killer. And you see it over the past few years of our most popular serial killers. You see that happen a lot. Like, Ted Bundy went into a house full of co-eds, I think probably 15 girls or something, and just like went into every room and started like trying to kill people. Like, that's insane. That's just like...
And to think he started on Married with Children. Look, I kind of like this episode somehow.
Bundy? Oh, I get it. Yeah. All right. Wait, that's he used to keep his hand on his pants, right? Was his name Ted?
No, it was Al.
Oh.
I was just making a Bundy
joke.
Oh,
that was a Bundy joke. Oh. My knowledge for serial killers is up here, but for 80 sitcoms is down here, so my line's got a little crossed right there.
It's Jay from Modern Family.
It is. Yeah, still weird looking. All right.
Sorry, Mr. O'Neill.
Sorry, Mr. O'Neill. I'm sure you're a great man.
Ed O'Neill's his
Ed
name.
O'Neill, you're a great man. Don't sue me, please. So the next letter after that is the From Hell letter.
Alan Moore.
This is the point where he is just off his rocker. He is just...
this is it.
This is it.
This is before he was...
No, this is it. He is gone. Like, he is...
Arguably,
done.
he was always
He's
gone.
Done.
But all right.
He's done.
All right.
So, on October 16th, so this is 15 days,
later,
yes,
yeah.
after the last murder, a parcel containing half a kidney, a human kidney, arrived at George Lusk's house. George Lusk was the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Think of it kind of as like the neighborhood watch, like kind of like we're looking out for each other and we're going to make everything safe. Then he received a kidney and a letter. Half a kidney.
And then he retired.
And then he moved away forever. Yeah. So this letter is commonly called the Lusk letter or the From Hell letter because it's labeled as being from hell. Like the return address is hell.
Oh.
Yeah. So the phrase from hell is used by the writer who claimed to have fried and ate the missing half of the kidney. Mm-hmm. So there's where I remember I told you there's going to be half a kidney involved.
Yeah.
Apparently he fried and ate the other half. And it was believed to have been taken from Catherine Eddowes. So it was believed that was
Which was the fourth.
Yes.
The second on the double, right?
Her fourth. Yes, this is the fourth. So when it comes to the From Hell letter, the handwriting and the style of writing are nothing like either of the other ones he's done so far. They're crazy. They make no sense. The words don't finish. The spelling is all off. And it's written in this really kind of like jagged kind of way.
Okay.
But the information that's in it is relevant to the case, so that's why they believe that it's still from him. To me, it shows a deteriorating mental state, and that this dude is, in fact, off his rocker.
Yeah.
He's gone. Like, he's
batshit.
He's that. He's guano. He's done. So the letter reads thusly. From hell. Mr. Lusk. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you, the other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk. So there was an S-H in Mr. Lusk.
Oh, Mr.
Mr. Lusk. Doesn't make no reason. The words are spelled wrong. Kidney is capitalized with a capital K, K-I-D-N-E. It was very nice. It's spelled N-I-S-E. The knife is spelled K-N-I-F. Like, these are all words that a doctor would know, a butcher most likely would know.
Anyone who is literate would know these words. Nice, knife, like these are basic words.
Anybody who has written 2 letters once before.
Right, at least 2 letters.
At least 2 letters would know this. So the kidney was taken to a doctor from the London hospital, and he determined that the kidney was human, was a left kidney, and had been preserved in spirits. In ghosts. It was preserved in ghosts. Ghosts preserved it.
It hadn't actually been preserved, but it was preserved in spirit.
Yeah, in spirit. The ghost preservation method is really popular. Really came up in the 1880s, I'll tell you.
And died very quickly soon after.
Died with the people. No, so it was never determined if it was actually hers. They didn't have DNA testing at the time. One of the doctors said that it still had the renal artery attached to it. Another doctor said it didn't. Like, her body still had the renal artery. Like, they said it fit together, and then it went together. Some doctors said it didn't. It was this whole, like, back and forth. Is it hers? Is it hers? Nobody knows. It isn't. Yeah. It is. Like, nobody knew.
Nobody knows.
The kidney I've seen. So nobody knew, for sure. Which is annoying. Because if only we had known for sure, we could have known that was legit. Like, this actually was her kidney. Or was it a pig kidney from a butcher?
A pygmy.
A pygmy. A county. No, that's like a knee. Like a county.
Or a county. Anyway.
So the last murder is the most miserable... One of the... I won't say most miserable. I will say... is one of the most miserable things that's ever happened to a person.
Liddy, this is your first episode.
This is my first episode. And it's one of the most...
You talked about
childhood. You talked about how happy your childhood was and how much you loved wrestling and how it improved your life. I'm talking about Mary.
All right, hit me with it.
All right, Mary Jane Kelly was believed to be about 25 years old.
Wow, much younger.
Much younger than the rest of the women.
It was also 6'8".
She was 5 feet tall,
no.
So she's very little. Could you imagine? She's like 7 feet tall. 20. He had a type this whole time, just never knew it.
Yeah.
He finally found it. So she was also known as Marie Jeanette Kelly, Fair Emma, Ginger, and Black Mary. So she had a bunch of aliases, a bunch of different names.
Okay.
So compared with the other Ripper victims, she doesn't really have a documented past or a documented origin, because they think she lied. They think people she was with lied. Like, she doesn't have a story. And it's really sad because she was the most destroyed by this person, and we don't even know who she was.
Right.
Like, we don't even have a clear...
common theme among this story.
Yeah.
We don't really know much.
We don't really know much. So we don't actually know who she was or where she came from or anything like that. So the man that she was with at her death said that she was like a scholar and she was incredibly intelligent. And then when he was pressed, like, well, you know, did you guys read about the murders in the paper? And she had him read the story to her because she couldn't read. So it was like, okay, so she wasn't a scholar because she was illiterate. So there was a lot of conversations back and forth that didn't make sense. And we don't know her story. So they think that she herself may have fabricated a lot of the stories that were about her. And so because of that, we don't really know much about her. But there's no evidence to the contrary. So some of these things that they said about her may have been true. We don't know.
Yeah. So
I will start by saying that the mutilation of Mary Jane Kelly's corpse was the most extensive of any of the Whitechapel murders. Probably because he had more time. So this happened in a room. This was behind a door where he had time to work. He never had time to work before. So it was suggested by a doctor that these mutilations may have taken over 2 hours to perform.
Oh my god. Okay.
So whereas before he spent maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes rushed, slit them open, throw out their organs, take their uterus, whatever, run away, now he has time to get to work. It's time to do what he wants to do.
Okay.
So we're going to get into what happened to her.
Yeah.
Ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
The face was gashed in all directions. The nose, cheeks, eyebrows, and ears were partly removed.
Okay.
Nose, cheeks, eyebrows, and ears.
Eyebrows is weird.
Yeah, all partly removed. The lips were blanched and cut by several incisions.
What does blanched mean?
Just very pale. Very white, pale. They didn't look good.
Yeah.
She had a lot of incisions down to the chin. There were also numerous cuts extending irregularly across all of her features. So she was just sliced all over her face. They said that it was so impossible to tell who she was that when the man saw her, he recognized her by her eye, like looked at her eye and saw it was like that. Oh, that's her because of her eye. And
hey, I can't help but notice you said eye and not eyes.
He just saw one of her eyes, and he could tell by her body. Something about her body. When he saw her, he was like, yes, that's her. But that's the only way he could tell. He could not see anything about her facial features that would determine that she was Mary Jane Kelly.
She was that mutilated.
Yes, she was that badly torn apart. The whole of the surface of the abdomen and thighs was removed. So he removed chunks of flesh, muscle, bone. He removed... One of her thighs was completely cut down to the bone. So she had no more tissue on her leg at all. So from her knee up, that whole section of leg was just bone.
Okay, so I've never seen like what a human leg looks like. Like cut down like that. So this is almost hard for me to fathom. I mean,
there's photos. I will warn you.
I don't want to look at those. Those will not be in this edit.
I will warn you, there are photos of all of these crime scenes, of all of these women who passed away. Just look at them with the utmost discretion because they are, especially this one, is very troubling.
Hey, don't. That's my advice.
All right. Don't try this at home. Don't look at them.
Don't.
But if you do, don't look at them in a public place.
It's just like...
It's just a bone.
Just imagining someone cutting out
So this doesn't exist anymore.
Meat of my thigh.
Yep, this doesn't exist anymore. This doesn't exist anymore. It's literally just a bone.
Oh, it's from both sides.
Oh, it's gone.
Oh, so it's just like skeleton.
One bone, yes. Just a bone.
Oh, that's bizarre. Okay.
Yeah,
I was picturing more kind of a section cut up from the top.
Nope, just a bone. He's flayed everything away from her thigh. It was just a bone.
Yeah, no, I get it. All right.
Okay.
What's next on your wheel of misfortune?
The abdominal cavity was emptied of all of its viscera. So all of the organs had been removed. All of the guts were gone, lifted out individually. The breast
was a very heavy man. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Viscera was a wrestler. Sorry.
I was trying to go down this road with you.
Yeah.
The breasts were cut off. The arms were mutilated by several jagged wounds, and the tissues of the neck were severed all the way round down to the bone.
Oh, she was a drumstick. Oh.
She was in bad shape. The viscera were found in various parts around the room. So the uterus and kidneys were with one breast under her head. They've been placed under her head.
What are you telling me?
The other breast was by her right foot. The liver was between her feet. The intestines were by the right side of her, and the spleen by the left side of the body. Okay. The flaps removed from the abdomen and the thighs were placed on a table.
I don't like that they're called flaps.
They were called flaps, skin flaps. So they were removed and they were placed upon a table nearby. He took her heart.
How?
Took her out to dinner. Bought her all the things she liked. He took her heart.
Did he break her ribcage?
Had to have.
Kind of go up under?
Don't know. Not sure. They just know they took
I don't know how the body works. I don't know if you can physically do that, but
I guess once you empty the chest of viscera,
yeah, you're kind of a human tunnel.
Yeah, you're just a little human tunnel. Then just choo choo. Here comes the train. It'll take your heart. I don't know.
I know that we're making light of this, but it's
nightmarish.
You have to make
it's nightmarish. It is. This woman hopefully died instantly.
Yes,
hopefully.
Jesus.
Because the things that were done to her body were abhorrent, miserable, awful things. There are more detailed accounts of this elsewhere, but I think that's enough.
Yes, I agree.
They're incredibly the police surgeon goes into great detail about each of these women, about how they were found, how some of them may have his job. Yeah, may have been asphyxiated before they were murdered and stuff like that. So he may have knocked them out with asphyxiation and then sliced their throats, which would kind of add credence to the fact that they didn't scream, or maybe didn't cause as much, as much hubbub because they were knocked out at the time of their throats getting slashed. But I think that that's enough for that. So there was a fire burning that was fierce enough to melt the solder between the kettle and its spout in the fire, and they believed.
And this was with her body?
This was, so it was next to it. It was in a fireplace. Okay. So it was believed that they were burning her clothes, but they believe it might have been his clothes he might have been burning. Because her clothes were actually found folded up on a chair by the bed. So she either knew this person or believed them to be a client or was comfortable with them in some way. So she willingly went into the room with this person, probably because her clothes were folded. They weren't ripped off of her. Yeah. So she's generally considered to be the Ripper's final victim. It's assumed the crimes ended because he either died, was imprisoned, was institutionalized, or left to go elsewhere.
Like Chicago.
Possibly Chicago. So that's as far as we know about Jack the Ripper. We do know a little bit about suspects, and I'm just going to very briefly touch on that because it's not... I say that and there's 5 paragraphs that I bring up. But... So they believe that he was in regular employment and lived locally in the area. Sure. Just because it was it seemed like it was happening every week, every 2 weeks or whatever. It seemed like he was in the area constantly. Yeah. And he had access to these women through the time. Now there's very, very many different theories about who Jack the Ripper could have been. But the authorities never agreed on any of them. And no formal charges were ever brought against anybody. It said something thousands of people were questioned, hundreds of people were investigated and like a few people were detained, but there was nobody ever formally charged with this.
Right.
And the suspect list is over 100 people.
Jesus.
Like, easily. So the swiftness of the attacks, the manner of the mutilations that were performed on some of the bodies, which included disembowelment and removal of the organs.
Yeah, don't even remind me.
Believed that the murderer could have been a skilled physician or a butcher, somebody who had access to these type of weapons which would normally just be considered tools. And other people thought that the wounds were too crude to be professional. So even that aspect was debated.
Disputed,
Yeah. So a few really fun theories for who possibly could have done it.
Sure.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle of Sherlock fame
Yes.
advanced some theories that said it could have been Jill the Ripper. So what if it's not Jack the Ripper? What if it's Jill the Ripper? What if it's a woman doing all of this stuff? Oh my god. And it kind of makes sense in a weird way because women would be more likely to trust another woman than they would with a man. And they could be seen with bloody clothes, like if they were a midwife. They could run around the town with bloody clothes.
That's interesting.
Because they wouldn't be considered out of the ordinary. And a lot of women weren't considered to be able to do that kind of torture and that kind of murder in that time because they were just weak little women. So they couldn't do murder. Women are smarter, by the way. Most women kill by poison, by guns, not by actual like physical stabbing and stuff like that. A lot of women don't kill themselves that way either. Most women will shoot themselves instead of stabbing or doing something that will hurt their faces because they want their families to be able to have an open casket. Weird things that happens to us psychologically. Anyway.
All right.
Jeff Mudgett, a descendant of the notorious American serial killer H.H. Holmes, used handwriting samples from the letters to try to tie in that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. He believed wholeheartedly that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. And that theory is actually basis for a TV show, which came out in 2017 on the History Channel called The American Ripper. Oh. So I didn't know that. So I'm going to have to watch that because I love the stories.
I knew that was about H.H. Holmes. I didn't know they were tying those in.
Oh, I love the stories about him coming over to the States and like continuing this reign of terror in the States. I love reading about stuff like that. It's really interesting, and there's something wrong with me. Other theories involve Freemason initiations. Lewis Carroll is possibly one that was thrown out there. A literal demon. We talked about that one at the start of the show. That one out. Van Gogh.
Because of the ear. Come on.
Hitler.
Okay.
And more. At one point, someone even kind of jokingly said it was a gorilla. And a lot of people thought it could have been one of the doctors from the royal family who had perhaps messed around with...
And gotten a triple-double.
And perhaps gotten something wrong. Got avocado. Despite continued interest in the case, as well as ongoing investigation, even now, like, you still see stuff popping up that it's like, we found the scarf with DNA on it, and we think that it was definitely Jack the Ripper's DNA. Guess what? It was probably just...
This hour-long episode proves that it maybe wasn't.
It was probably just a dude that slept with a prostitute. Probably didn't kill her. Probably just slept with a prostitute. But the Ripper's identity will most likely never be known. And I kind of prefer it that way. I think it's a better story to not actually know who he is.
Yeah, it would kind of dilute the intrigue.
Yeah.
Because then it'd be like, oh, and then it was John Smith, and we all were happy.
And we all know who it is now.
Well,
and
this
now
dude's
it's
dead.
Over. Yeah,
whoever did it.
Yeah. Nobody knows. It's not going to change anything.
Right.
All of these women died. Like, it's not going to change anything about the story. And what does it solve knowing who it is? Doesn't solve anything. I think it's much more interesting that way. I have a theory that it was a guy who slept with a prostitute and got syphilis or possibly gonorrhea.
Oh, okay.
And because syphilis will destroy your brain over a period of time. And I think he just got crazier and crazier and he blamed the prostitutes.
Interesting.
And he went after prostitutes that were of a certain age and body type and he killed all of them until he found this one that invited him to a room, and that was his piece de resistance. That's it. That's what I think.
That's your theory.
That's my theory. I think it was just a dude. I don't know. He may have been a very well-to-do boy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that his brain was rotting from the inside out, and I think he took it out on a bunch of prostitutes.
Well.
Ta-da! That's Jack the Ripper.
That was something.
Next week, we'll talk about puppies and kitties.
Yeah, please.
With dorm streams. But yeah, so this stuff is super interesting to me, and I'm a super weird person. I'm aware of it. But
no, it's totally interesting. I think it's fascinating. It is a little rough to get through sometimes, but...
Yeah, especially when they stab through their eyelids.
Yes, agreed.
And
That's no fun.
Poke their eyeballs. With sharp instruments.
Liddy, where can people find you?
People can find me at twitch.tv/Team Liddy. Where can they find you?
Twitch TD, no, not TD.
Nope.
Not a touchdown. My mind is so mangled from this.
Mangled mind.
Yeah.
Mangled mind.
Mind freak. Twitch.tv/dormstreams or dormstreams.co.
Dormstreams.co. That sounds interesting. What's that?
It's a website I made.
You have a website?
I do.
You also have a YouTube channel.
I do.
Do you want to talk about it?
It's Dormstreams. I'm very consistent.
Yeah, you kind of all together.
Well, I learned a lot.
Did you? I'm glad.
I knew nothing coming in.
You're going to have nightmares tonight.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No problem. Happy to help. I fall asleep listening to true crime stories. I fall asleep.
Ow.
I fall asleep watching Forensic Files.
You dork.
Can't help it. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah, maybe.
Until next time, don't get killed.
What? Is that how we're closing the show now?
No, I'm just saying, like, don't.
I guess that's good advice. Don't get killed?
Don't get killed. Until next time, watch where you click. Be careful.
Oh, that's good.
Be careful out there.
I like that one. Watch where you click. Better than don't get killed.
Watch where you click. Just be careful. Be careful. Don't get murdered. What are we talking about next week? Do you know?
No.
Oh, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
You did.
I apologize.
Watch where you click. That's what we're gonna use now. I like that one.
Until next time, watch where you click.
Yeah.
That's it.